Yeah, I'm saying it now, mate. It looks sweet as a nut,
Have you
mate.
given it a proper once over?
Yeah, I'll kick the tyres, mate. They're sweet, I'm telling you, mate.
You've got to do more than kick the
Look,
tyres, mate.
I'm going to offer him the asking price, right? I'm snapping his arm off, mate. I'm telling you, this is the bargain of the year.
You're going to buy another dog, mate. Why? You don't listen, Dave.
More and more people these days are choosing a van life as a cheaper alternative to a house or just for holiday accommodation. But with prices so high, what seems like a money saver can quickly turn into a money pit if you throw all your cash at a horse that turns out to be a dog. But don't worry, we've got your back. This quick no-nonsense guide will have you spotting a lemon from 1,000 yards before you can say, "Bloody rapscallions!" Let's crack on then, shall we? So you found the van you want. What's next? I'm going to ring them. No, you're not. Before you contact the seller, there are a few checks you can do online. If the van doesn't have an MOT, or it has an MOT that's coming to an end and it's for sale, then it's likely it'll need some work doing to get it through, and the seller knows that. Because vehicles with a full MOT are worth a lot more. So if it would sail through, and they'll no doubt tell you it will, then they'd have done it themselves, wouldn't they? Sometimes they'll tell you there are a few bits it'll need to pass the MOT, but we all know a few bits can easily turn into a fistful of dollars, a few dollars more, or even the good, the bad and the ugly, without the good. You can check previous MOTs online and check for any advisories from its most recent test. Advisories are things that the MOT test has spotted weren't serious enough for it to fail its test at the time, but are likely to need fixing before its next test. Make a note of these advisories, because if you do go for a propaganda, then you can have a shufty through the service history, see if it's been seen to, physically look at the parts yourself, or ask the seller, depending on what they were. Also make a note of the registered mileage at the last MOT. If it's lower than that when you go see it, walk away. You can check all of these things at gov.uk, links in the description. You'll also want to check the vehicle is taxed, because driving an untaxed vehicle or one with a statutory off-road notification, SON, on the road is illegal and you will be at fault if caught. The number one rule for buying a used car or van is never buy without a test drive, so no tax, no test drive, walk away. You can find this at gov.uk, links in the description, as always. Other useful info can be found through a vehicle history check. However, unlike the previous checks, which can be done for free, the vehicle history check does cost, so you might want to hold back on this until you've had a proper look and test drive of the van. There are a few companies that offer a full history test, but we always use the value check. Of course, every seller is going to tell you that they're offering their vehicle at the best price. But if you want the truth, ask Parker.
Yes, belady.
No, not him.
Conditioning.
I said not him. Wait, who is that? Parker's guide will give you a proper valuation of your potential ride. Just follow the link, you know where it is. So you're happy with everything so far and you want to go have a goosey gander. So you get him on the blower and what do you say?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions.
Yes, you want a test drive from cold. You can slip through a few of the steps here if you feel like it, but don't skip this. We'll explain more later on. For now, just make sure that the seller knows you want the engine cold when you get there. If you get there and the bonnet is warm to the touch, then it's likely the seller has something to hide. Does it have a V5C or logbook? If it doesn't, then walk away. Or tell them you'll come back when they've got one. And it has to be the full A3 piece of paper that folds into A4 size as well. If it's just a little green slip, then it could be stolen, written off or under a finance agreement. That could mean you not only losing your money, but being arrested for handling stolen goods. It does happen quite often and the police may be sympathetic, but still.
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
Next, ask when the cam belt stroke chain was last changed and when it's due. Cam belts and cam chains, also known as timing belts or timing chains, are slightly different and chains don't need changing as often as the belts. However, each van manufacturer do recommend change intervals for both. If it's nearly due, that will be an expensive job. So if you're blowing most of your budget on the van and don't want any big jobs straight after that, walk away. You might want to find out beforehand how often the type of van you're looking at needs a timing belt change and match that up with the mileage. For instance, if a 2014 Movano needs its timing belt changing every 75,000 miles and you're looking to buy one with 70,000 miles on, then you're due an expensive belt change in less than a year. So watch out for that. Another important thing to ask for is a service history book. If there is one filled with receipts, then you know the van's been looked after because all the evidence is right there. If they have none of that, or if it stops being updated when they bought it, well, what have they been doing with it? However, as we are aware, some people are looking for a unique fixer-upper kind of deal on a low budget to build, and there's a good chance they won't have all the paperwork at the lower end of that spectrum. If this is you, then you'll need to pay extra attention when we get to the checks below, as the older and cheaper the van is, the more likely it is to have problems. Ask them what they've been doing with the van. This is important. For an example, a 2019 Vauxhall Vivaro with 110,000 miles on the clock could be preferable to the exact same van with 80,000 miles on the clock in some circumstances. If the van with 110,000 miles on the clock has been used exclusively to transport Walker's crisps from their factory in Leicester up the Garry, Up the M1 to Gary Lineker's secret love shack in Leeds. Even though it's done 30,000 miles more than the one with 80,000 miles on the clock, they're all motorway miles with light cargo. Also, Walkers are a reputable company and would likely keep it in tip-top condition with a full manufacturer's service history. On the other hand, the 2019 Vauxhall Vivara, with 80,000 miles on the clock, has been used exclusively to shunt heavy paving slabs and bricks through horrific London traffic by Dodgy Dave the cowboy builder, who regularly overloads the van to save trips and eats pasties in the front seat with a fag in his gob. Is this van going to have a full manufacturer's service history? Nah, Dave gets his mate down the pub to carry out any repairs he needs in exchange for a few pints. Good news is, though, that the timing belt needs changing at 72,000 miles and this has done 80,000, so it must have been changed, right? Wrong. Dave's mate down the pub don't do timing belts, so it ain't being done. So what are you going to do? Walk away. Walk away to Walkers. Insurance. Even though you'll only be driving the van for a short amount of time on the test drive, you still need to be insured to drive it on the road. Some policies will allow you to drive any vehicle at any time, but most will only cover your own car. So you'll need to check your policy there. You could ring your insurance company and get temporary cover for the test drive. That might be the easiest option, or you can get cheap temporary cover here and in the description below. Viewing the van. There are a lot of areas to cover here, but don't worry, we're not expecting you to remember all of this from the video alone. There are printable checklists in the description to take with you. Let's start with the outside. Oil patches. First thing to look for is oil patches underneath the van, or near where it's parked. They may have tried to pull a fast one by not parking it in the usual spot, so watch out for that. Oh, and also it should go without saying, don't meet anybody in a service station to buy a vehicle, or anywhere it's not normally kept. But anyway, an oil leak could mean a cracked head, worn gaskets, cracked sump. It could be a simple cheap fix, but it could be colossal. Either way, it's bad news. Bodywork. You want to take a look at all the bodywork, including the roof, for any dents, bumps, scrapes, intentional keyings. You don't want to buy a van whose owners had enemies, do you?
Oh, I will punch your head inside. Oh, come here!
Nope, bodywork is mainly cosmetic and a personal preference really. Can you live with a dented door for a lower price? It's up to you, but if any bare metal is showing from a scratch, bump or scrape, then that is going to need treating and painting ASAP, and that could turn into a big job, so if that's a worry, then walk away. Rust. Rust is the beginning of the end for any van, and we would never recommend converting a van with rust in it anywhere. If you are going to spend so much money buying and converting a van, it's really important to start with a good solid base vehicle that won't fall apart in a few years. If you can only afford a van with rust in some places, then you need the time and money to get that sorted before you start converting. Fixing rust after the van's been converted will be a lot more complicated and in some cases impossible, depending where it is, and you don't want to be ripping things out to fix it. It will involve decent welding skills or a large bill for a professional fix. If you don't have either of those things, then walk away. Rust in places like the doors, bonnet and roof is not ideal but not dangerous. However, there are some places that suffer from rust that can cause the van to become dangerous and even fail its MOT, like the floor, wheel arches, sills and struts. So if there is any sign of rust in any of these areas, it's probably not worth the time and money. There's plenty more fish in the sea. Tyres. The next thing you want to have a look at is the tyres. One of the most important things on your van. They'll hurtle you and your family along at speeds of up to 70 miles an hour, so they better be kept in the best condition they can be at all times. That means tread, pressure, tyre walls, the whole lot needs to be tip top. And you're about to hop in a van you've never seen before owned by a total stranger, so you want to check and double check. Not just for safety, but because if you're caught driving with tyres more than 10 psi below the limit and with low tread, you can get points on your licence, so you're going to need a pressure gauge and a tyre depth gauge. In general, just always have them. The pressure can be fixed on the spot, but if the treads are low, walk away. You also want to check the walls of the tyres too, because if the outside wall has cracks or bumps or lumps, then it's pretty much a death trap. Lumps usually occur after a heavy lit like a pothole, causing the tyre's cords to fail. The cords are what gives the tyre its strength, so without those you get lumps and before long tyre failure, possibly a blowout, and you don't want that on the M1, so watch out. You should also check that the tyres are wearing evenly all the way around. If they aren't, it could be as simple as incorrect tyre pressures, but could just as easily be problems with the tracking or suspension, which could be a more costly fix. Not a deal breaker, but something to take note of in your budget. Suspension. Suspension's an easy test. Push down on each corner of the van. If everything is working as it should be, the corner will bounce back to its normal position like this. If this happens, you have a problem. Again, not a particularly costly one. Well, that one might be, but one to take note of. Number plate and VIN number.
Does the carpet match the drapes?
Oh my.
I mean the number plate matches the VIN number. You will have noted these down when you did your pre-test drive checks. The VIN number will be on the dashboard somewhere and usually visible from the outside of the van, and the number plate should be... yeah, you know where that is. Now let's get that bonnet up. Coolant. Whip that lid off and have a really good look in there. We're looking for oil. Even any rainbow patterns from a little bit of oil is a sign that something is seriously wrong, like a cracked head or failed head gasket. Both big money fixes and both a walk away situation. You're also looking at the coolant level while you're in there. If it's low, then there could be a leak somewhere. Where is anybody's guess, and anybody is going to charge you to find it and fix it, so think on. This is another reason you must view the van cold. The system is pressurised, and opening that lid on a hot engine is going to give you nothing but this. But hotter. Oil. Assuming you survived that, it's time to check the oil. First, check the level. There should be a maximum and minimum level, and the oil should sit somewhere in between. If it's sitting low, then that could mean it's burning or losing oil somewhere. If it's high, then it could mean the same thing and has just been topped up incorrectly. Next, check for any water mixed in with the oil. These will be visible as little droplets, air bubbles or thick creamy milky deposits and could mean a leak in the coolant system. Costly, but also, water mixed in with your oil can cause serious engine damage as it reduces the oil's cooling properties. If it's been driven like this for some time, there's a good chance the engine is seriously damaged inside, so that's a walk away. You should also check the consistency of the oil. Ideally, a van's oil should be an amber colour. The lighter amber, the newer the oil. Sometimes it might look a bit blackish, but if you hold it up to the light, you'll see a hint of amber in there. This is older oil and should be changed soon. If the oil is milky, as mentioned, could be a coolant leak, or could be that the van has only been taken for short drives, not long enough to get up to temperature. So any condensation caused by combustion makes its way into the oil. In the early stages of this, the oil might look grey, not milky. If the oil is jet black, then this is a sign that the van hasn't had an oil change in ages and is no longer cooling the engine correctly. Just needs a good service and oil change. If it's sludgy and black, yep, you guessed it, walk away. Check levels. Whilst you're under there, you'll also want to check the brake fluid and windscreen washer levels are correct, so you know it's safe to test drive. Then when you test the washer jets on the test drive and nothing sprays out, you know it's not the fluid's fault. There's something wrong elsewhere. Doors, locks, windows. All three of these things are very important for van life, as you don't want to be walking around checking every door every time you pull up, or getting soaked when rain falls through door gaps, or pulling up to a toll booth only to realise that your windows don't open.
This has happened to you, hasn't it?
Yeah, I was
Not funny. So before you set off on your test drive, make sure that all the doors lock and unlock with the button on the key fob if it has one. It's quite common to find vans that have had the ignition barrel changed or a single door lock replaced because it's cheaper. Tell them that the money they save doing that will be transferred to you and you save by giving a lower offer, because you want to be able to lock and unlock everything with the click of a button from inside or outside the van. A lot of modern vans also have alarm sensors inside that are motion sensitive, which can usually be deactivated by the key fob. It's vital that this works properly if you're converting into a camper, otherwise it'll keep going off all the time when you're inside sleeping. Best thing to do is a bit of research beforehand to figure out if this model has that feature, and if so, how it works. Then you can test it out properly when you get there. Windows. First, check the windscreen for cracks or chips. It doesn't take long for chips to become small cracks or small cracks to become big cracks.
So what was all that about enlarged holes and tight cracks?
Very mature. Chips can be filled and windows can be replaced, but just remember to add that to your budget. Next, check any extra windows. If you're buying a part or fully converted van, make sure they're all functioning as they should, and most importantly, can be locked securely. Also check for any rot, rust, water runs or leaks. Leaking windows can be a major problem as they'll let water into everything and rot it out. It can be an easy fix if you have the money, but if you don't, then think on. Every flaw is a payout further down the line. If you're buying a van with skylights or roof windows, then you'll need to check them for leaks as well. You can get a good idea from the inside, but if you can get up on the roof or to a higher vantage point, then even better. Finally, the most important windows to check are the driver's and passenger side ones. Make sure they're both opening and closing properly and smoothly. It's best to test them both with the engine running and without, as they require quite a bit of power. Any juddering is a sign of something on its way out or muck on the mechanism. Both are quite easy to fix yourself, but could take a couple of hours, so if you are paying someone else to do it, that's a lot of labour, and labour ain't cheap, so think on. Doors. Another frequent problem with used vans is wonky doors that don't quite shut properly, which is no good for multiple reasons. The first reason is leaks. Like we said, if water gets in through a gap, it'll rot out, no matter how small the gap is. If it leaks in under your wood floor, and that rots, your whole conversion will need ripping out to fix it. Not good. Second reason is security. If the doors aren't closing properly, then there's a good chance that the central locking sensors won't connect, so when you press the button on your fob thinking it's locked, you're thinking wrong, and leaving your van open to wrong uns. Also, there's a method of breaking into vans called the peel and steal, in which thieves grab the top of the sliding door and just bend it downwards and leap into the gap. They're in and out in seconds and away, so a door with a gap at the top big enough to get some fingers in is like a birthday present to those light-fingered opportunists. Don't give them it. It's most common on side doors because of the way they work with rollers and runners, but other things can go wrong with other doors, so make sure you check them all thoroughly. Some of these problems can be fixed quite easily, again, with a spanner and a few adjustments, but if the runners or rollers are a problem, they're going to need replacement, and that isn't a quick or easy job, especially if the van's already been converted, because you might have to dismantle some of the build to get the door off. Test driving! Before jumping in the driving seat and going for a blast, there's a few more things you should check while the engine's running. Smoke. A little smoke on start-up isn't always a bad thing. It can be caused by a few different things. So to find out what, you'll need to have a good look at it and determine what colour it is. Blue smoke is a big no-no. If you see that, get the hell out of Dodge unless you have very deep pockets. It's caused by oil somehow mixing with the fuel and is an expensive fix. It sometimes can look white, so make sure you look at it from all angles because you don't want to get it mixed up with white smoke. Because white smoke is perfectly normal on startup. It's usually just steam and will disappear once the engine gets up to temperature. If white smoke is still kicking out when you get back from the test drive, then things may be more serious. This could mean a blown head gasket or cracked cylinder head. Both more hassle than they're worth and a definite walkaway situation. Black smoke. Black smoke on a cold start also isn't a bad thing as it's just excess fuel burning off. Any vehicle can struggle on a cold morning and push too much fuel through before the engine actually starts. That'll cause black smoke on startup and it's perfectly normal. But if there's still black smoke coming out after the test drive, this means that there's another imbalance somewhere in the air-fuel ratio and your engine isn't getting enough air. This could be as simple as changing the air filter, but could also be a faulty sensor, a block pipe, a fuel pressure regulator, or a few other bits and pieces. None are particularly expensive to fix, so black smoke is not a game changer. However, again, if you're looking for a van that is ready to go and have no extra money for repairs, black smoke will likely cost about 100 quid or so to fix, so beware of that. Lights and indicators. Properly functioning lights and indicators are a legal requirement for a vehicle on the road, so although problems in this area are usually a quick and expensive fix, it's unlikely they can be done on the spot for a test drive. Remember, if you're driving it, then it's your responsibility, so check them all before getting behind that wheel. Headlights, brake lights, side lights, full beam, hazards, indicators, extra lights on the side, reflectors, and just for good measure, interior lights. Why not? Weight and height. Before you drive the van, it's also a good idea to double check that your licence covers you to drive it legally. If you have a normal driving licence and pass your test after 1997, you can drive a van up to 3.5 tonnes, fully loaded. If you have a normal licence and passed your test before 1997, you can drive anything up to 7.5 tonnes, fully loaded. To find the weight, just look inside the driver's door on the frame for a metal panel, and the weight you need to pay attention to is the top weight listed. Height. It's also a good idea to make a note of the vehicle's height, just in case you're driving in an area unfamiliar to you and there are bridges or anything else with drive-through height restrictions. You don't want to be doing an 11'8" on a test drive, do you? You should be able to check this in the manual. Check all other functions. I have been guilty of forgetting to do this quite a few times and always end up with something really small but highly annoying. I'm not going to go into details on each bit as that would take forever, and some vans will have bits and pieces that others don't. Basically, if it's in the van and it's meant to do something, it should do it or it will cost you time and money to fix. If you have something in the van you are viewing and it's not on the list, be sure to check that it works properly. Along with radio. Radio, does it turn on? Does it receive signal? Do they have the code? Windscreen wipers, washer jets, horn, electric windows, electric mirrors, interior lights, speakers, heater on all settings. Aircon, does it work? Does it need recharging? Seat controls, handbrake, the higher you need to lift it before it clicks, the sooner the cable will need replacing. Seat belts, do the sockets work? Do they lock when tugged quickly? Is there any damage to the belts? Mileage, does it tally with your online checks? Bluetooth, auxiliary cable points, hands-free. Warning lights. When you turn the key in the ignition, the dashboard should light up like a Christmas tree. This is to test that all warning lights are functioning correctly. They only stay for a few seconds, so be quick to note they're all working, and more importantly, all turn off. Any warning light is an instant MOT failure, so think on. For the actual test drive, it's all pretty basic and straightforward. You just need to check that everything works, feels and sounds right. You will all have some driving experience, so most of this should be second nature to you, and if anything seems off, it will be obvious. A few things I will say though is that vans are mainly diesels, so the engines might sound a bit louder and mechanical to you if you're used to petrol engine cars. They also don't have as much sound deadening as petrol cars, so engine and road noise is louder in a van and completely normal. Also, if you are driving a van for the first time ever, please be aware that the braking distances on vans are nowhere near as good as cars, so leave more space and start to brake earlier. Commercial vehicles also have different speed limits on some roads. For example, cars can go 60 mph wherever you see a national speed limit sign, but vans can only go 50 mph, so make sure you know them. You should also be more aware when turning or passing parked vehicles, as vans are much longer than cars, so you have to turn later and slower into side roads, for example. And when passing parked vehicles, check your mirrors to make sure you're completely passed. The test drive shouldn't be just a quick drive around the block in low gears. You are going to want to make sure you do a few things. 1. Drive for at least 15 to 20 minutes. This will make sure the engine gets to temperature. Drive on fast roads. You need to test the van in all gears. Drive around roundabouts. Check for knocking and noises. Left-hand turns. Check for knocking and noises. Drive up a steep hill if possible. Reverse. Just check all is working as it should. Give the heater a blast when the engine's warmed up. Does it get hot? Are there any noises coming from the brakes? Squealing, grinding? Does the steering wheel shake when you apply the brakes? Does the brake pedal feel spongy? How high is the bite point on the clutch? High is bad. Does it slide in and out of all gears easily? Does the gear stick pop out of gear or try to move? Vibration's okay. Is the accelerator pedal responsive? Does the van try to pull to the left or the right? Does the rev counter needle shake instead of moving smoothly? Can you hear any belts screeching? Does it overheat? Keep an eye on the temperature gauge. Are there any weird smells? You've got to keep your wits about you and check all of those things. After the test drive, once you get back, there are a few things you need to check again before switching off the engine. Check the exhaust pipe again now it's warmed up. There shouldn't be any smoke at all. Any sign of blue or white smoke, it's best to walk away, as this will most likely cost you a fortune. Black smoke will not be as expensive, but will still cost. Think on. Look for oil dripping from the engine onto the floor. As oil heats up, it gets thinner and will leak out of smaller holes a lot easier than when it's cold. So the van's been parked up for a minute or so, still running. Check on the floor for fresh drops. If you see any, there is obviously a leak and this will be expensive to diagnose and fix. That's about it. So it's decision time. Still not sure? If you think you like the van but are still not 100% sure about it, then there's something else you can do. You can pay a reputable company like the AA or the RAC to go and have a look at it for you and do a full check over of the vehicle with lots of specialist tools and expertise. They do charge quite a bit for the pleasure though, so you don't really want to take this approach to every van you look at. I'd only use this service once you've done all your checks on the van and you've decided you want to buy, so you're not just throwing money away. It's also a good option for anybody that has found the van they want to check out but it's at the other end of the country. It would probably cost less to get the AA to go check it out and report back to you than it would to get a train, bus or drive to see it anyway. So, that's a lot to take in one go. But don't worry, as mentioned earlier, we have created a checklist in PDF format for you to print out and take with you to the test drive. Also, if you'd like to scan through all this information at your own pace, there is a written version of it on our blog. Link, as always, will be in the description. Okay, so that is it from us today. We hope you all found it helpful. If you did, please consider hitting subscribe for more guides, tutorials, unboxings and giveaways, all coming very, very soon. We are Van Life UK, a complete survivor's guide. Thank you for watching.